Hey, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. The U.S. is signaling the exit from Ukraine, giving little seeds that it's coming. I'm going to get into that story and how I predicted it, by reading somebody else who predicted it. But I'm going to take the credit. I'm going to be like, look, I read to you this guy who predicted it. And so, yeah. But on top of that, I'm going to cover one of the main celebrities. I didn't know what other word to use. One of the main focal point dude assholes from the Unite the Right protest in Charlottesville that resulted in 1 dead and many injured. He has died, but I'm going to reveal a bunch of other facts about him and what went down. And it's an interesting story, to say the least. And we all get to hold hands and go, hey, remember those fucking assholes? Yeah, I bet they're back assistant managing an Arby's. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Actually, they don't make it up to assistant manager. They're in charge of like the cheese gun or something. You know, that's it. They got that big caulking gun that just excretes cheese. That's their job. They're never making assistant manager. Anyway, there's also a great article about where have all the comedians gone, meaning where have all the comedians that actually say real shit about what's going on in our world and in our country. Where have they gone? There's a great article that I'm gonna give you a little taste of on that. A lot of big stories coming up. A lot of big stories. Lots of big stories. Let me just click that. Behind the scenes stuff you don't need to see. Okay, but so a couple of days ago, not that long, like honestly, like a week ago maybe, I brought you this story that Rand Corp, which does a lot of analysis. It's it's a corporation, but it does a lot of analysis for the U.S. government. And the U.S. government often takes the advice of Rand Corp when they do these studies, when they do these policy briefings. And it's not meant for the public. It's not meant for you and me to read. However, some of these studies get leaked. Some of them get shared because they're not by a government agency. So they're not generally top secret. Anyway, as I brought to you, and I'm not going to go through all the details again, but it analyzed what's going on in Ukraine. And by the way, Rand was probably, I don't know this for certain, but probably one of the policy studies that told the U.S. to create the proxy war in Ukraine. I wouldn't at all be surprised. But anyway, it went through like the amount of benefits, the costs and risks, the likelihood of success of what's going on right now in Ukraine and where the U.S. should stand and what the U.S. should want to get out of it, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it goes without, if you want my full analysis, you'd have to go back a week and watch that live stream. But it goes without saying that these are sociopaths. They advise the other sociopaths that run the fucking government. And so they are coming at it from a sociopathic analysis of like, there's no consideration of like lives or humans or shot. You're not going to see a paragraph in a Rand Corporation analysis that's like, a child died. Like, it's none of that. It's just, here's what's best for America, the America Incorporated, etc. So in one of the key points, they say the U.S. says that Rand can take measures. Sorry, the U.S. says Rand. So the U.S. can take measures that make a quick end of the war possible. So Rand starts talking about how the U.S., it would be better for the U.S. to get out of Ukraine soon, to get out of facilitating and being part of this proxy war fairly soon. Now, they're not saying it was a bad idea, which, of course, only a sociopath doesn't know it's a bad idea to create a proxy war that causes millions upon millions of refugees and kills thousands and destroys an entire country. Only a sociopath would say that's a good idea. But, of course, our ruling sociopaths say, that's a great idea. It's awesome. Wonderful. Cool. High five. High five, circle jerk. So they're not saying it's a bad idea, but they're saying it's time to wrap it up. We did what we came for. It's kind of like the Henry Kissinger analysis. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe proxy war was not bad, but it's time to wrap it up. Long war is actually not good for the U.S. in this proxy war, which, by the way, former CIA Director Leon Panetta, among others in power, have called this a proxy war. So it's not only me. It's not only the weird, long-haired hippies calling it a proxy war. But they're saying from a brutal pro-America, yay hegemony standpoint, it's better for the U.S. to kind of wrap this thing up. Basically, the U.S. has gotten what they needed out of it to some extent. Yes, some of the sanctions have backfired. Yes, some of the sanctions on Russia have not worked at all, or most of them have not worked at all. But certain aspects of what we wanted from this proxy war has worked in that we were able to drain some of Russia's military abilities. We cut Russia off. Our key goal of all this was to cut Russia off economically and otherwise from Europe, from most of Europe, forcing Europe to turn to us for more expensive gasoline, etc. So a lot of that worked out well, forcing China to pick a side so that, to some degree, so that the U.S. could further hate China, and just simply being able to create the propaganda that Russia is, Putin's the new Hitler and he's going to take over Europe. All of that has been a success in terms of bullshit propaganda in that way. So these maniacs are saying, look, we got what we came for, time to wrap it up. And we don't care, Rand and much of our ruling class is saying, we don't really care if Ukraine has to give up territory in the peace negotiations. It's not really a big deal. Like no one in our ruling class or our ruling elite in our fucking oligarchy give a shit about the Donbass region of Ukraine. If Ukraine has to cede Donbass, they don't give a shit. They never cared about the Ukrainian people at all. They wore their little Ukrainian flag pins, but they didn't actually care about the people, the humans. This was all done for the U.S. to achieve certain geopolitical aims. So anyway, Rand saying wrap it up. And Rand then says, the Rand analysis says that the U.S. could take measures that make a quick end of the war possible. It can press Ukraine to start negotiations and to accept a bad outcome, meaning less than what Ukraine claims to have wanted to get out of this war, which was Russia fully removed from their country at all, to accept a bad outcome by threatening to stop financing the war. The U.S. could threaten to stop financing it. It can encourage Russia to enter into negotiations by offering substantial sanctions relief. And so here's an actual quote from the Rand analysis. A dramatic overnight shift in U.S. policy is politically impossible. So remember some of these words. So it's impossible for Biden, the Biden administration, the Congress, Republicans, it's impossible for all of them to suddenly go, we're done with Ukraine. Because it would look bad politically, right? It would look like the U.S. was cutting and running. It would look like the U.S. didn't care about the Ukrainians, which they don't, but they don't want to look that way. And it would have a bad look. They have a bad smell for the U.S. to go, we're out. But instead of some overnight shift, they say it would look bad, but both domestically and with allies, and would be unwise in any case. But developing these instruments now and socializing them with Ukraine and the U.S. allies might help catalyze the eventual start of a process that could end this war, that could bring this war to a negotiated end in a time frame that would serve U.S. interests. The alternative is a long war that poses major challenges for the U.S., Ukraine, and the rest of the world. So, and the key word when I read this, and I remember reading and going, socializing it. They're going to start socializing the idea, which is kind of an abbreviated form of saying social engineering. They're going to begin creating the social engineering for Americans, Europeans, etc., to believe that it's in the best interest to actually sit down and hash out a negotiated peace. And we're going to begin socializing this. And sure enough, so I read that stuff to you a week ago. Here we are, this week, Washington Post, U.S. warns Ukraine it faces pivotal moment in war. And if you continue down, as the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine nears, U.S. officials are telling Ukrainian leaders they face a critical moment to change the trajectory of the war, raising the pressure on Kiev to make significant gains on the battlefield while weapons and aid from the United States and its allies are surging. Despite promises to back Ukraine, quote, as long as it takes, Biden officials say recent aid packages from Congress and America's allies represent Kiev's best chance to decisively change the course of the war. Wow, what does that sound like? Does that sound like they might be socializing that they're getting ready for a negotiated peace? And by the way, I'm fucking all for peace. Do it now. Fucking sit down at a goddamn table now. End it all immediately. But I'm also saying that this is amazing because this goes against everything the U.S. told us, right? Everything the U.S. government told us, told Ukraine. They said this Russian invasion came out of the blue. It didn't. They say, we had no idea this would happen when we created a Nazi-backed coup in 2014. They said, et cetera, et cetera. But so, and because this is so outlandish and horrifying that Russia would do this, we are in it to win it. We are never going to back down. We are going to fight to the last Ukrainian in this proxy war. And now here we are, the exact opposite, right? This is the U.S. saying, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, defeat Russia in your war soon or we're out. Which, of course, is not going to happen. Ukraine is not going to defeat Russia. So what is the U.S. signaling? They're signaling that they're done soon. The U.S. government is done soon because they've gotten about 70 to 80% of what they wanted. And the 20% they didn't get, such as sanctions crushing Russia, is not going to happen anyway. So in terms of U.S. oligarchs, they're done. They did it. They did the thing, and they got 70% of what they wanted. They've cut off Russia completely from Europe in terms of oil and economic partnerships and everything else. They've succeeded in all those. Now they've lost in other ways. They've lost in a lot of ways, like the fact that 80% of the world's population actually is in countries that have not signed on to U.S. sanctions on Russia. The fact that the sanctions on Russia have boomeranged and are harming Americans, and the Russian ruble has actually gained on the euro and the dollar compared to where it was before the start of the war. But those things aren't going to happen now anyway. So the U.S. is ready to back out, and they're signaling that, which is hilarious considering what the U.S. said. What the U.S. said they were doing. Quote, we will continue to, this is said by one senior official, said, we will continue to try to impress upon them, meaning Ukrainian leaders, that we can't do anything and everything forever. That's funny because at the beginning of this, you said you'd do anything and everything forever. That's like exactly what you said. The senior administration official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive diplomatic matters, added that it was the administration's very strong view that it will be hard to keep getting the same level of security and economic assistance from Congress. Quote, as long as it takes, because that was the famous quote from Biden, right? We're in this as long as it takes. But this official says, quote, as long as it takes pertains to the amount of conflict. It doesn't pertain to the amount of assistance. What the fuck are you talking about? Here's the thing. If I were an idiot and I had believed all the liberal garbage coming out of MSNBC and CNN, I would right now be sitting there going, wait a second. We have to save the Ukrainians. That's why we're in this, right? That's why we sent the fucking, all the military equipment, $100 billion. That's why we sent it over there in the first place. Was because we have to save the Ukrainians. We have to save them. And now our government is going, we're not gonna like save them forever. We're not gonna like really do that because the U.S. this was a proxy war for the U.S. to rip some things out of the process. and they got some of it. They didn't get some of it, but now it's over in the U.S. terms. Now, for Ukraine, it's not over, right? If you know, if you're in the Ukrainian military right now, you're going, what? But there's also a lot of Ukrainians that either consider themselves Russian or have a lot of allegiance or family with Russia. And so they want to see the war end as well, because they understand that war is not good for a society. War destroys societies. But anyway, so while I support where this is headed, while I support that the negotiation table could be on the horizon, I also want to say this could have been done first of all, it could have been done before the thing ever started. If Ukraine had actually stuck to the Minsk agreement, which Zelensky and Angela Merkel and others have all admitted was a stall tactic and not an actual peace agreement, which begs the question, why is Russia going to believe in peace agreement now, considering you all have admitted that you signed a peace agreement, never intending to stand by it? But so it could have been stopped before it started. Then once it started, there was a peace deal that was going to be signed last April. And Boris Johnson, at the behest of the United States, went running to Zelensky and said, don't sign it and don't go to any more peace agreements. So any more peace negotiations. Don't even sit down with them. And Zelensky, of course, being the puppet he is, did exactly that. And here we are. Ukraine, millions of refugees, thousands dead. And the U.S. is like, hey, yeah, wrap it up. Wrap up that war thing that you did at our behest with Russia. I mean, it's just insanity, but this story also shows, like, not to toot my own horn, but wow, how am I predicting all of these things? How was I able to predict all this stuff? How did I know the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, etc.? And I'm sure many of you know all these things as well. But it's like, all you have to do is study how the U.S. operates, study what the mainstream media generally tells you and what it doesn't. Like, listen to the people that actually know what they're talking about, rather than the mainstream media. And you know that Ukraine's not going to defeat Russia. So it's got to end at a negotiating table at some point, either a negotiating table or nuclear war. And why can't that point be now? Or how about now? Or what about now? But the U.S. is making sure that doesn't happen. However, now you have them socializing the fact that you guys should be ready, you guys meaning the American populace, everybody should be ready for the U.S. to stop being a part of this thing soon. Now, that doesn't mean the U.S. is going to, withdraw all the NATO weaponry and everything and stop pushing up on Russia's borders. All of that will continue. All that shit will continue. And, there was a large story that, as I said at the time, I'm 50-50 as to whether it's true or not, that the CIA and others have been involved in sabotage within Russia. Now, I think it's quite possible. But I also think that could be a story the CIA puts out there because it makes Russia nervous to think that could be real. So it could serve a purpose to actually make that up. Okay, let's move on now. This story, it's going to seem a little old at first, but I promise you there's a lot of updates, and I've got a lot of kind of inside knowledge, because I am not glad I was there, but this is one of probably the few national news stories where I was fucking there. I was in it. And it wasn't fun to be in it. I'll tell you that much. Okay. So this reporter has done a great Twitter thread on the fact that one of the main celebrities, or whatever word you want to use, one of the main focal point people of the Unite the Right protests, he was one of the main images that got shared by people with the torches at UVA. That guy is now dead, and we're going to go through a little bit of his his story here. And I know it is weird that in order to get like information, real information, you have to turn to like Twitter threads now. It's like it feels like it feels like you have to get your news from a fucking like fortune cookies. Like next 12 words, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up by next fortune cookie. The United States using deep dive teams. Anyway, it's the world we live in, apparently. So Molly Conger has done some pretty great reporting here. But she says you probably remember this photograph of these assholes, fucking Nazis at UVA. It was August 11th, 2017. It's one of the more iconic and awful images of the Nazi torch march at UVA. On August 12th, the following day, the man in the center was elated to see himself on the cover of papers across the country. Today, I can tell you he is dead. And so, I was there, not during the night before, during this Tiki Torch thing, but I was there the following day. I was 5 feet from the car that crashed through the people. Basically, if that guy had done his terrorist car crash action, I'd say 15 seconds later, I would have been in the middle. I would have been hit because we were marching towards that intersection. We were headed towards that intersection, and he drove through, and the only reason he wasn't able to drive through the whole crowd is because he actually crashed into a minivan that had been stopped basically in the intersection. Because when a lot of people march through a street, some of you may know this, cars that don't realize something is going on, they sometimes get stopped and they go, oh, fuck, I'm behind a march. And so they have to sit there. So this minivan was sitting there perfectly peacefully in the middle of the intersection, but couldn't move. And so this guy tried to drive through everyone. And he only succeeded about driving down that one street and then crashed into the minivan in the intersection and then jammed it in reverse and headed back the way he had come. I was about 5 feet from me and Eleanor were about 5 feet from that minivan, and it was horrific. It was, because yes, one person, Heather Heyer, died, but dozens were horribly injured. I mean, people just flying in the air. And I'm not going to show any of those images or that video, which has been played on loop by so many news stations, because honestly, it becomes trauma porn. And on top of that, it's traumatic. It's, I still have some level of PTSD from that shit. So I'm not going to show that. But then the other weird connection is I also went to UVA for college. So, and I lived like, you see this photo of these assholes with the fucking right-wing Nazi torches, which I love that they had to use tiki torches because they couldn't get regular like fucking Klan torches. So they all just have these like Home Depot little tiki torches. We got our tiki torches. They should have put on like fucking, Hawaiian print shorts and have their Bahama wear on, cabana wear. Anyway, I lived to the right of that image, like literally the door of this. It's not even an apartment. It's like it's a room. It's a half a room. Like your arms touch the two. If you stretch your arms out, they touch the two walls. Anyway, I lived in one of those that was just to the right of where these assholes are. So this UVA was like my front yard for a year, and here are these fucking Nazis out on it. It's pretty crazy. So anyway, this is probably the most famous image. Honestly, this is the one that I had seen many times. So the guy she's talking about, Teddy von Nukem, is the guy, not the guy in the front there. Which, by the way, does his face not represent everything that a racist is? Just fucking vacant and angry. Anyway, the guy off his left in the photo, left of him in the photo, in black, is this Teddy von Nukem guy. He changed his name in 2012 to Teddy von Nukem, and he was identified as a torch wielding man in the photo. And he had been known by friends for saying unsettlingly positive things about Nazi Germany. And so going through his texts, apparently, I think in some sort of trial, they found that he was really excited to be, this isn't a guy that was like, oh, maybe I'll go and hold a tiki torch. I don't know. This is a guy who's fucking into it. And he's texting about how excited he is to have been splashed all over Nazi newsletters, and even mainstream media newsletters had it out there, and he's thrilled. Let's see. Anyway, so he's thrilled by it. So then something else that was horrible and memorable about August 12th, which was when Heather Heyer was killed, is that on that same day, and that was the day I was there, August 12th, in a parking deck, a black man named DeAndre Harris was beaten horribly by a group of Nazis, and he went to the hospital, and was traumatic PTSD, all the horrors of going through that. Assaulted by a half dozen people in a parking garage. By the way, nothing says we're big tough men like it taking 6 dudes with bats and pepper spray to fight or to beat up one innocent man. Nothing says we're so tough than that. 6-1. You've got bats and pepper spray. He's got nothing. And you're really, really tough guys. Tough guys. So anyway, 6 people, let's see. 4 people were convicted. She lists them. All convicted of malicious wounding for their roles in the assault. 2 other participants, known as Sunglasses and Redbeard, were never found. So she's showing the image of the 2 people that were never found, Sunglasses and Redbeard. However, she says a 7th assailant was never even looked for by the police. And she then shows photos taken by Z.D. Roberts minutes before the assault began. And it shows Von Nukem, same guy as that other image, walking along the streets with the same assailants that were convicted of that beating. So he's with those other guys, and he's in all black, which not everybody is, but he's in all black. So this video, also by Z.D. Roberts, shows the group walking up Market Street. Von Nukem is holding a black baton and has a visible handgun on his hip. So here's inside the parking deck. This is after the beating, after they attacked the man. And you can see that Von Nukem is there. He's with these other assholes, big tough men who beat up a guy 6-1. And he's with them. Yet he was never convicted or looked for or charged with it. And so she then says, if you go through the video frame by frame, you will see a man in all black hit DeAndre, whatever his name was, DeAndre Harris, hit DeAndre Harris with a baton. And Von Nukem has, in those same texts that I mentioned earlier, he bragged about beating up a black guy hitting him with a baton. So he bragged about it, and he's a man in all black that fits his description as seen in the video. Yet police never looked for the 7th man. So he was never prosecuted for it in any way. But she makes a pretty incredibly strong argument that it was him, and he should have been obviously prosecuted. Then she says 2 years ago, Von Nukem was driving over the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona. Customs found 15 kilos of fentanyl in his back seat. He told authorities he was living in Mexico with his wife and several children and had accepted money from a stranger to drive packages to the U.S., and he didn't know what was in them. He just had no idea. I thought it was dildos. Von Nukem was set to go to trial for drug trafficking on January 30th, 2023. He didn't show up in court. U.S. Marshals were unable to locate or contact him. His attorney couldn't reach him. His wife eventually notified the attorney that there'd been an emergency. Last week, federal charges against Teddy Von Nukem were officially dismissed. He died on January 30th, 2023, the day his trial was set to begin. Teddy von Nukem, the focal point of one of the most famous photos of Nazi torch. The brutal racially motivated assaulter and accused drug trafficker died at 35. He is dead now, which I don't think there will be many people not celebrating that. But so I guess she doesn't know the cause of death, but it certainly sounds like he took his life. Which, you know, we are all just so sad about. Really, really torn up. Anyway, I wanted to bring that to you both because it's a fascinating update. It's good to remember these things and remember that this fucking horror can exist in America. And also the I had never seen the story about him being or this guy being the last person that was never even looked for in the assault of DeAndre Harris. I had not seen that story, and it seemed like an impressive amount of investigative reporting to put that all together. And like I said, it was a horror to behold, to be there and to be in the middle of an event. You know how they say that, you know, we're quickly getting to an event where, quickly getting to a time where everybody in America has been somehow, tangentially or not, touched by a terror attack. I mean, if there are mass shootings, which we know there are mass shootings or attempted mass shootings going on every single day in America, and we're getting to that point where everyone knows someone who was somewhere, or you'd been at a mall the day before and something then happened there. And, you know, I'm one of these people that was in the middle of one of these things. Wasn't a shooting, but it was someone trying and succeeding at killing people with a car. And, you know, got very lucky. It wasn't me or anyone I care about. But all right, I want to move on to the next story. Where have all the comedians gone? This is not me writing this, but I will give my. This is another one where I have a personal input to add here. But I have several more stories, but we're going to do the rest at rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's rumble.com/Lee Camp. It's completely free to go over there and join me. Here, I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat just so you can be like super lazy, just like as lazy as can be. I'll go ahead and throw this in the chat. But join me over there for the rest of this live stream. If you're watching over there, nothing will change. Also, I hope everybody will join leecamp.net. Even if you don't want to sign up at the paying level, I hope you'll just join up anyway, because you still get a bunch of cool stuff. You won't get everything, but you'll still get a bunch of cool stuff. leecamp.net, that's my local page. If you're on Rumble right now, you can just click the red button. That will take you to my locals page. All right. Let's see here. Almost